Hey, today's video is about the different developer tools that I use. Now, this video ended up being super long, so I'm actually going to cut it up into two parts. This is part one. It still covers quite a lot. So this video, you can take a look down at the chapters below to jump to the tools that you actually care about. But the first part will be about the text editor that I use, then a few different AI tools. The third part will be about different solutions to help deploy your application. And then the fourth part of the video will be about different SaaS platforms I'll be using, things like for hosting databases, for sending marketing emails, and so on. So I hope you enjoy it. Please subscribe to the channel. Usually I talk about a different open source project each week. I will cover some open source projects in this video, but this is more of a general video to help you be more productive as you develop and build your own apps. So let's dive into things. So the first tool is Cursor. Cursor is an AI code editor, and if there's one tool you try out from this entire video, it should definitely be this one. People are raving about it. This is a tweet by Josh Miller. I went from never hearing about Cursor AI to many engineers telling me it's their new favorite tool, seemingly overnight. Pretty wild product market fit. This is from a month ago. I've been using it for a few months. I think everyone I know that has used it thinks it's brilliant. So you should definitely go and check it out. This is what it looks like. It's a fork of VS Code. So if you're already using VS Code, it's going to be very easy to switch over to. I was using VS Code for years and now I use Cursor. It's basically the same thing. I mean, there's some small differences here on the sidebar and so on, but yeah, largely it's VS Code. Here you'll see my terminal at the bottom. And so some of the things that are really cool about it, you can do Command L to just start chatting with it, or I could do Command K to generate some code, write a helper function. Well, let's see what it does. Sure, you can accept it, you can ask for changes and so on. What's really magical about it is it seems to understand the code base very well. Yeah, for example, here it's just gone, because it knows we've done help recently, it's gone and added this button with on-click help and so on. Let's see if it decides to do something else now. No, it hasn't auto-completed yet. You can obviously do things like ChatGPT. Well, okay, so here it's gone and decided to auto-complete for us. So this is like Copilot, and you might be thinking, well, you know, I use Copilot already. This isn't so good. So listen, Copilot was brilliant when it came out, but having moved over to Cursor, having tried both, it's just a lot better in Cursor. And so I'll show you an example here actually from the video. Here you'll see a typical example. Somebody's writing the word help, and it just auto-completes 3 lines. You hit tab, it just auto-completes. Deletes that, adds, you're going to see types AR, hits tab, and it just works. And it somehow always seems to know what you want to do. It has great context of the code base, and it just is auto completing so much. It's not just these videos, like they're showing brilliant stuff in the demo videos. This is actually what it's like to use it from my own experience. Here you can see you're telling it to go and change this code. So it's going to go and make the change. If you want to add a new suggestion follow-up instruction, you can accept it, and it will just put the result into your code base. You can also chat with it in the sidebar. I actually use Claude a lot for this sort of stuff, but sometimes I'll go and use this, and you can very easily add context to the sidebar. So let's say I don't know, I have a bug over here, or I don't know, whatever it is. I can just add it to chat. What does this do? And it will go and give me the answer. And another thing you can do is over here in the terminal, it can also add this. So you can see it's gone and added this to the chat as well. You can add multiple different files of context. You can get you can add docs for different projects into it and so on. And yeah, overall, it's just been a really great experience. You can upload images into the chat like they're doing over here. I didn't even know that was a feature. Here, they're like within the terminal, you can go and do stuff, as I mentioned. But yeah, it knows your code base. That is definitely what I found, and why it's been a lot stronger than ChatGPT, or sorry, for Copilot than me. Just hit tab and it auto completes, as we saw already. This is exactly what it will feel like when you're using it. And edit in natural language, I don't use it so much, but yeah, also helpful for many people. And you'll see some great engineers are using it, like Johannes from Prisma. After many recommendations, I finally switched from VS Code to Cursor, and wow, it's absolutely incredible. If you like Copilot, or if you don't, you'll be blown away by Cursor. There's no going back. My experience was similar. But yeah, go check it out. It's free to try out for like 2 weeks. Well, you can try out a lot for 2 weeks, but you should go beyond 2 weeks from the free trial. But if you want the $20 a month plan, which I've really found to be the best, but even that, you get a 2-week free trial. Next up is Warp. It's funny I mention it because I haven't really used it a whole bunch. But it's just a really nice terminal, and you can talk to it in natural language. So for example, you can tell it, hey, I want to revert my last git commit. You might not remember the exact git command for it. For example, here, expose Docker port in container, and it will just go and automatically do it for you. So this is another really cool tool you should go and try out. Next up is Claude. You're probably familiar with ChatGPT and Claude. but yeah, this is my tool of choice. So you can see it's going and writing the code. It's been pretty good, and I often use it in my workflow. Over the cursor one, there's no real reason. Honestly, I could probably just use a chat as well, but yeah, I like using Claude and just coming to a website, typing it in, and I like the updates they've been making recently. Another tool I really like is the AI SDK, where you can from Vercel, where you can compare different AIs, LLMs, so GPT-4o here, Llama 3B 70 Grok over here, and then Claude 3.5 Sonnet over here. You can give it a command like write some code or write a blog post, and then you can see how all three give their output. And that's really helpful for you to decide if you're trying to, use an AI in your work, not just to help you work as a developer, but you're using their APIs and it's part of your platform. You can see how each one is performing. So for example, here, this is 70 cents per million tokens. This is $5. This is, 6 times cheaper or something like that. So if it can give you the same results and maybe even faster, then you would choose this over the GPT-4o and so on. So this is a really good way to compare. Another tool I use to compare is dogbots.ai. It's a pricing calculator. So for example, if you're processing emails of 2,000 words, your output, you're just classifying them so they're 50 words, and you get 2,000 emails for a user a month. You can see how much each of these different AIs is going to cost you. GPT-4o would cost you $30 per month per user in that case, but if you're using 3.5 Turbo, it would only cost you $3 per month. So this is a tool that's really helpful to understand how the different LLMs, what the actual output pricing is, because input and output pricing is different. It also can be confusing if you're working with tokens and you don't know how that converts into actual words or letters. So anyway, this is a nice tool that I mentioned. Another maybe obvious tool is Midjourney. From what I've seen, this is the best image generator tool out there. Here you can see some of the examples. If you need imagery, if your landing pages, or maybe you want graphics for parts of your application, so this should do a really good job. So yeah, worth checking out. If you want to run LLMs locally, then Ollama is a really nice tool for that. So Llama 3, Mistral, these are open source LLMs basically, and you can literally just download them to your computer and run. This is best for privacy and also for costs. It won't cost you anything to run these. You won't have to pay a $20 per month subscription to Claude or to OpenAI to use these. As I mentioned, Vercel AI SDK, I also mentioned their toolkit, which I really like. This is being changed the whole time, but some things which are really cool about it: a unified API for API providers. You can also generate user interfaces. It's compatible with lots of different frameworks, and you can also stream AI generated content in. I'll probably do another video of these on this specifically. I've been meaning to do it for a while, but this is what it would look like. Here you can see I'm using generate text from AI, and then here's OpenAI. Now I've changed it to Anthropic. Now I've changed it to Gemini, and so on. So if you have AI in your application, this is a really cool tool to use. It also supports tools or function calling and also embeddings. In this section of the video, I'm going to talk about different tools you can use to deploy your app. And I'm going to start off with Vercel. I know AWS is the go-to for a lot of different people. Maybe if you're watching this video, it isn't, and you'll prefer tools like Vercel. But I think a lot of companies make a huge mistake where they're wasting a ton of money and time on DevOps when they could be using platforms like Vercel, like render.com, and it just all sets it all up for you. So just to explain the differences, I'm not going to do a demo of Vercel. There's probably 1,000 demos online, but to get started with Vercel will literally take you 5 minutes or less. You'll push to GitHub, you'll connect your GitHub repo to Vercel, and it will just go and deploy your app. Let's say a Next.js app, it will just deploy it out the box. You'll set some environment variables to get it to work, and then it will be done. So that's cool. But beyond that, then every time you create a new branch or a new PR, it will also do another deploy of that. So you'll be able to test it out very quickly before you actually put this live into production, and team members can also go and check it. I primarily used it with Next.js, so that's sort of where I'm coming from. I don't know what it works like if you're using it for PHP or Python. I think you can use it for those as well. But yeah, if you're running a Next.js app, this by far I would say this is the go-to place to go and deploy it. They're also the team behind Next.js, so that makes sense. And yeah, you'll have Next.js serverless functions running on their platform. And they've started to do integrations with Postgres and Redis and a whole bunch of other things that you can use within their platform itself. But just the core of deploying this has been around for years, but still it shocks me that many teams don't know about these tools. They still think you've got to go to AWS or a similar platform to deploy, and it's just such a headache. If I was to set this same thing up on AWS, which I've done in the past many years ago, you'd do things like code deploy, you'd set up your own EC2 instances, or maybe if you're using serverless it would be different, but and so on, and you'd need to get things like auto scaling set up. This will just like work for you out the box. It will auto scale. You just don't need to think about anything at the start of any project. There's not going to be any real cost. Maybe at a certain point you want to move over, but frankly, if you need to move over at some point, it's not the end of the world. You would have had to put that time in anyway, so you could either decide to put that time in at the beginning or later on at the end. But it's going to be like quite a long way till like the costs rack up to the point where it's like you just want to spend thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars of developer time on like DevOps type work when you could use something like Vercel. Another platform you should know about when it comes to don't use AWS, use some other managed platform is render.com. They will provide you with basically anything that you need. Here you can see you can use static sites. So that is something like Vercel will do as well. But then you also have web services, long-running web services. The reason you might not use Vercel is because it's serverless, so each function could be maximum 300 seconds. Here you can just have an ongoing server running endlessly. Render is, I guess, somewhat like Heroku, but I wasn't a massive Heroku fan in the past, but like I do really like what Render has done, and I've been using them for a few years. You can see private services, background workers, cron jobs, and they also have their own Redis and Postgres, which is really nice. It's nice that it's all just packaged into the same platform, and so a lot of projects literally they will cover everything that they do. It covers the database side, it covers the web servers, the front end, the back end, and yeah, the deploy. So it's all just in one place. You can use it for lots of different runtimes. Node.js, Python, Ruby, Elixir, and so on. Also, in terms of scaling, let's say you now need 100 instances, it will go and set those up for you, and you can easily like move a slider to like increase and decrease and so on. And also, depending on how much CPU is being used, it can auto scale or scale up and scale down, which is really helpful, as a lot of apps have like certain periods where they're extremely busy, where you might need 100 servers up, and then they have periods when there's no one on the site. So all of this is just set up for you. You could do these same things on AWS. It's just a lot more work. So, I value time highly, and that's why I recommend platforms like this to a lot of people. Two really cool things they have are infrastructure as code and preview environment. So let's look at their infrastructure as code. So you basically have this render.yaml file. If you're familiar with Terraform or CloudFormation, so apps like that. So that's basically, this is Terraform, but for render.com specifically. But I would say it's also even easier than Terraform. You don't need to go learn about like the different Terraform, like how you want to get like an AWS EC2 up and like all the different services you need. Here, you'll literally just add like 20 lines of code. Here, we're adding a web service with a database. Also, the database environment variable key is stored here, and it all just works. And so you can, this is in your repo as well. If you want to launch a brand new service, like you can do that as well, and everyone can have this within the repo, everyone within the team, so they can go and set up themselves as well if they wanted on a brand new account, and you just don't need to think about anything, and it's just so simple to do. Then let's say you decide to make a change to your app, and now the start command is Python M. You just want to remove the M, so you can like delete this line, git push, and it will just be updated and live. And the databases they provide are Postgres and Redis, but you can also have cron jobs and also private services and background workers and so on. So really easy to use. And this was one of my favorite things about Render. So imagine just doing git push and suddenly your Postgres is up the same way as your web service is up. And the other part of that, which I love, is a preview environment. So preview environment, here you can see you've enabled it in the render YAML file. You can also enable it from the dashboard. But what it does is it will create a preview version of everything you have set up. So imagine you have a web service, a Redis database, a Postgres database, and now you want a brand new one for every pull request. You don't want the pull requests impacting production databases, so you want to set up a new Postgres database for that. And so platforms like Vercel, they're cool because they will automatically set up a new front-end deployment with I guess, Next.js APIs for every new branch. But here it goes even a step further. It actually give you a database as well, and potentially a completely clean new database. So that can be really helpful for people. And here you can see sort of what it would look like. I mean, this is very common. If you've used like Vercel or Render, you wouldn't even be shocked. But like having to set this stuff up on your own, like here, it's just like you spend 30 seconds on it and set up. You don't have to do anything. It just works. If you have to set this up yourself, it takes time. And usually the people telling me like, oh, it doesn't take time, I can set it up in 3 days. Well, yeah, 3 days, I could set it up in 30 seconds. and people telling me like, no, I could do it even quicker. It was like, so many of these teams spent hundreds of thousands of dollars like doing the same stuff. And it's like, well, just look at your salary bill. You have a DevOps person, like you're paying them like $150,000 a year. That's real cost. Like here's some other company that just doesn't have that position because, you know, they're using managed services. I think for people that have used both options, often like they heavily favor platforms like Render and Vercel or Railway or Fly.io. There's a bunch of others. But yeah, obviously it really depends. And look, I'm not going to tell you should never use AWS. I just think in many cases, it's just overkill. It's complicated. It's messy. And a lot of the people saying that you should use it are just, they haven't tried out both options. So try out both options and tell me what you think. I know there are people that have gone from like platforms like Vercel to AWS or like other providers. You know, costs can be a factor sometimes, but if you take into account the cost of your time or your developer's time, where you're spending $10,000 plus per month in many cases, that's a real cost to consider. So you want to try and make it as quick and easy as possible for your team to get started. And that's why I love platforms like these. If you do want to host on AWS, and sst.dev is worth a look. I haven't actually used it myself, unfortunately. I'm pretty happy with Vercel and Render for myself at the moment for a lot of the stuff that I'm doing. But yeah, this is what it looks like. So here we have a new Next.js website. This will be deployed to AWS. Here you can see we have RDS. So this would be like a Postgres database that you're deploying. Here you have a GraphQL API. Here you have authentication. I'm guessing this is Cognito. AWS's authentication system. And then here you have a cron job. You're adding an ECS cluster and so on. And here you can see how you go and deploy it. So this is definitely worth a look. This is supposed to make it like very easy to go and deploy all this stuff yourself on AWS. I've spoken to some junior developers that tell me like, oh, it's quite easy to deploy on AWS. And like, I've wasted my time on AWS. I know what that platform is. I still use it today. I've spent tens of thousands of dollars of my own money on the platform, okay? Or not my own money, my company's money. And so, yeah, I've wasted time on Terraform, I've wasted time on Ansible, and that's why I'm pushed in these directions when I've also used other options. And I'm just like, well, this is obvious, this is better. Anyway, take it as you will. But if you haven't used the different options, like it takes like 10 minutes to try out these other platforms, so just go try it out. You might be pleasantly surprised if you're one of these people that think you have to use AWS, but you don't. The last solution I'll mention is Coolify. Coolify is an open source and self-hostable Heroku, Netlify, Vercel alternative. So the great benefit here is that you have something like Vercel, but you're hosting it yourself, and this can lead to tremendous cost savings. So if you use something like Hetzner, you can get really cheap servers, even compared to AWS. Here's an article where someone saved 100x just on egress fees from switching from AWS to Hetzner before their AWS CloudFront bill had spiked from $370 in September 2021 to $2,500. And if we scroll down, you'll see that now moving to Hetzner, their bill is only $41, which is insane. If you're not familiar with Hetzner, it's a place to host your own servers. Here you'll see the cost of one. It's 46 euros per month, and you're going to get 64 gigabytes of RAM and 14 cores. Now, this is amazing pricing if you compare this to anything on AWS. Here I have Amazon EC2 on-demand pricing, and if we take a look at different models that are 65 gigabytes and let's say 16 CPUs, you'll see that the pricing is much larger. So $1 per hour is $730 per month. So all of these you can see anything for 65 gigabytes on EC2 on demand is going to cost you $400 per month. It's at least 50 cents a minute or so. And you can see a lot of them are like $1 per minute. So in order to compare one-to-one for Hetzner, that's not what I'm doing here. But either way, the price for anything on AWS is, you know, $300-400 minimum compared to what we just saw for $50 per month. And that doesn't even include things like data transfer and all these other fees you're going to run into on AWS that Hetzner will cover for you. So there are some tremendous cost savings. And the reason people still choose AWS is because they provide lots of different services and you have to do less yourself, similar to why you might choose Vercel over AWS. And by the way, Vercel is more expensive than AWS. From what I understand, all or a lot of Vercel is just built on AWS behind the scenes anyway. So you do have to keep that in mind. But if you really want to go to the extreme of like minimizing costs, then Hetzner can be an incredible option for you. And about Coolify, which is how we got into this, it's fully open source and you can deploy it yourself. Here you'll see a dashboard where you'll be able to host lots of different projects. Here you can see a Node.js project, a Nux project, Bun, and so on, a Docs project. You can host databases here, and it will give you a lot of the magic that you're used to on a platform like Vercel, but without having to pay the Vercel costs. And you'll have significant cost savings if you run this yourself. And you can host things like a Postgres database on this yourself as well. You could host multiple different projects on like a single Hetzner server, or you could also run Coolify on AWS, by the way. It doesn't have to be on Hetzner. In terms of Vercel, you can get into sticky situations once you go over the free tier. Now, something to consider is that the pricing has changed quite a lot over the years. So I remember getting a big bill one time when the first 1,000 gigabytes of bandwidth for me were free. And then the next 100 gigabytes after that, it started costing $55 a month. That's no longer the case. It actually changed to $40 per month per 100 gigabytes after that. And now it's actually dropped even more. Same fee is either now $15 per month for 100 gigabytes or $6 per month. The huge spikes in pricing that you might have seen in the past, they're not as pronounced anymore. So overall, there's no right solution. If you know you're already going to get huge traffic from the beginning or huge bandwidth costs, there are a lot of different things to think about. Do you cache stuff? Do you use a different service for images instead of Vercel? Yeah, so that's definitely something worth considering doing, because Vercel for image hosting can be really expensive. You have S3, you have Cloud as well as an option. So yeah, definitely things to consider. AWS is obviously still used by a huge number of companies. There's no right or wrong answer, but to me, one of the core things to think about is how much time this will take you. If you're a small project just getting started, something like Vercel is almost a no-brainer in my opinion. If you know you've already got huge traffic because you're a big company, and as soon as you turn on this service, it's going to turn into huge traffic. So you can probably calculate the cost and decide if it's worth it or not, or if you want to be self-hosting. But for many early projects, definitely something like Vercel or Render is my go-to and what I would recommend. And if you're not familiar with those platforms, if you're someone that only knows AWS as an option, try out those platforms. It will take you 5 minutes to get started. And many people I've spoken to, once they spend those 5 minutes, they're like, yeah, Ellie, you're right. Why was I trying to break my head about setting this all up on AWS? It took me 5 minutes to do on Render instead. Now I'm going to start talking about some different providers for databases. Neon is one of them that I've been using over the last year or so. I really like it. It's for Postgres hosting, and it's the database you love on a serverless platform designed to help you build reliable and scalable applications faster. So the things they point out which are great about it are the scaling and the branching. It runs serverless, which means like the compute, let's say you have a project that isn't like really being used a lot, you're not going to be paying for every second that project's being used. You're only going to be paying for the compute time. You'll be paying for storage and you'll also be paying for compute, but in short, the costs should scale to 0 for you. And here you can see what's included in every package. But yeah, basically you're paying based on usage and not just because you have something lying around. And so in many cases that can be really helpful if you want to leave a project running a very long time, even though it's not getting heavy usage. But then when it does have heavy usage, it can automatically scale up and handle any need you have as well. Then branching is probably the coolest part of it. So basically instantly branch your data and schema to access isolated DB copies for development, CI/CD, and schema migrations with copy and write storage. Basically what this means is, let's say you have a production database and you want to do tests against it because this is a real database, and if you test against a staging database, you're not going to get the real results you would if you were to do it against production database. But also at the same time, that's a ridiculous idea. You don't want to be testing against your production database. You could end up randomly deleting users, changing things you don't want to. So what if you could just copy paste the production database and do all your tests against that? Then you have the best of both worlds. You have a real database to test against, for performance and actually how your data is structured for real, and many different use cases and edge cases within that database. And then you also are not impacting the real production database. So that's what the branching is. It's super, super easy to do. You just click branch and it happens. It's just done instantly. And then you get a new connection string. You connect to that database and that's it. You can also use it for CI/CD. So every time you have a new PR, let's say you have a dev branch or someone's adding a new feature, you can go and have a copy of the production database so you can use it like it's a real app. but then, you know, you're not impacting production. So, I mean, to me, that's like incredible. You could also optimize queries on production data. So let's say it's a 100 gigabyte database, but your staging database was 1 gigabyte. So you're not going to get the same results if you test it on staging. So that's another nice reason to want to test on a copy of production data. If you're a Supabase user, then they also have some support for branching. It still seems to be early access. To take a look at them, I haven't used this specifically, but I have used Neon and like it quite a lot. If you want a database to handle analytics type data or just like really amounts of data, but really quickly, then Tinybird is a really cool option. If you've heard about ClickHouse, so that's a great database for this sort of stuff. This is basically serverless ClickHouse. So I actually have a video from this a few months ago, but I had something like 50 gigabytes of data and I did a query on it and, you know, I got back a result in like 0.1 seconds or whatever it was. So super fast. If you ever have like an issue like that where you're just constantly streaming in events and data, then this is a really good platform to use for that. And yeah, I think they actually just raised like $30 million, which is cool. And Canva Design uses user-facing analytics with Tinybird. So yeah, there's some cool stuff they have around, like also like just creating like your own analytics for users as well. In this story, this doesn't fully surprise me, but processing 1.4 petabytes per month, that seems like a huge amount to me. 31 million requests per day, and the P99 latency is under 50 milliseconds. And it wouldn't surprise me if there was like pretty little effort that went into it. It just, you know, Tinybird just worked out the box for it. When we moved those use cases to Tinybird, we shipped them 5 times faster and at 10x lower cost than our prior approach. I mean, I've used Tinybird, I use it for Inbox Area. It wouldn't completely surprise me. You do want to be careful about using it in cases you don't need it. I wouldn't see it as a replacement for Postgres. So let's say you just want to grab one item from the database, like say a find unique or a find first. That's not going to work great in Tinybird. It could cost you quite a lot because you're still processing huge amounts of data. But in terms of, let's say you need to show analytics charts for users and things like that, then it can work incredibly well, and I highly recommend giving it a try for that. When it comes to serverless data platforms, Upstash is another that I really like. They support Redis, vector databases. So if you're doing stuff like embeddings with LLMs and so on, then this is quite new. It can be helpful. And then Qstash as well. I think that this would be like an alternative to something like Pinecone. So yeah, Redis is just serverless Redis, similar to what we saw with Neon for Postgres, but this is for Redis. And yeah, the cost can be really low, especially if you're not using it at huge scale. By the way, here you see some of the teams: Vercel, Tinybird, Supabase, a bunch of the others that we've mentioned in the video using it. Fly.io is like another alternative to Render, worth a look as well. And Qstash is messaging for serverless. So often you will have like a serverless function that can only run for, let's say, 300 milliseconds, or, you know, typically it will only run for 15 seconds. So what you want is to message some other service, or like to like keep that process going. So having things in queues can be very helpful in that case. I mean, there are a lot of reasons you'd want to use messaging in your app, but Qstash has been like a really nice platform for that for me. And yeah, I think they used to have support for Kafka. I guess maybe they removed it. That was the one part of their platform I've never used. But yeah, it looks like maybe it's disappeared or they're no longer selling it. If you want to send emails, transactional emails, or even marketing emails now, Resend is a good option. It's quite a modern and, like, I guess a trending platform that a lot of people are using. There are other options. Many have existed in the past, things like SendGrid, Postmark, Mailgun, you know, SES. There are just so many different options you can use. This is the one I've been using over the last year or so for 2 different projects. I like it quite a lot, honestly. Take a look at the pricing. I mean, this is something I do early on for any project I'm going to use, any platform I'm going to use, but I feel like the pricing is quite decent. Obviously, it's not SES type pricing, but it is going to go and handle a lot more for you. It does marketing emails as well, but you don't need to use that. Here you'll see what it looks like. So here we're importing the Resend packages in Node.js. I set up Resend. We've got a Next.js post route, and we are going and sending the email, and that's about it. And so the API, the docs are really nice. As well. This is using Next.js app router, as you can see. And over here is something which is really cool. This isn't specific to Resend, but they're using React email here. And you're basically putting in an email that was written in React code, which is really nice to have it there in the code base as well, especially for the transactional emails. This is React email. It is by the Resend team, but you don't need to be using Resend to use it. But basically allows you to write your emails in React, which is, yeah, super helpful. And they've got lots of different examples here. You can see different providers it integrates with, like SES, Postmark, SendGrid, Resend, and so on. And so this is the example we already saw. Here you create the email in React code. Here you use Resend and you just send, and that's it. This is a Resend documentation itself. It uses Mintlify, which I'm going to get to shortly. But you can see the docs are pretty nice. The docs within the platform are also very nice. Here's the API documentation. It's very simple to the point. If you want to add a new audience, you just run this. You can use their API, like here are curl requests if you want, but if you want to just use their npm package, you can do that as well, and it's very simple to use, and has TypeScript. And so yeah, on the topic of email, another platform that I use that I've also done a video on is Loops. Here you can see a lot of great teams using it. Email for modern software companies, better way to send marketing and transactional email. So I use them basically for my marketing emails and for onboarding campaigns, and basically what they call loops. So here you can see the 21,000 emails have been sent to people in the onboarding loop, but it will look something like this. So when a contact is added, you add them via the API, for example, then you want to, on sign up, then you want to wait one day, and then you want to send them an email, and then maybe you want to wait another day and send them another email. And so every day you want to give them a bit of education about your platform, not overwhelm them all in one go. So it's really great for things like this. Take a look at my other video if you actually want to sort of dive in. I'll leave a bunch of video links in the description, so you can just jump to those. Other things I do with this, let's say when a user cancels a plan, I'll send them an email, hey, do you want to get on a call? I'd love to understand why. If they upgrade to premium, I'll be like, hey, let's do an onboarding call. It will help you get it set up better, and so on. And so yeah, that's how I like to use Loops, and overall it's pretty simple. Similar to Resend, it will have pretty good documentation to get started. Here you can see they're also using Mintlify for their docs as well. The main thing you need to do in the API is just add users as they come in, add contact data, I guess, and yeah, then everything else. You can design the emails within their platform as well, which is helpful. And then in terms of when those emails actually get sent, so that's just based on that chart you've already set up. Having spoken about Mintlify twice just now, you can see we're going to take a look at this, and I use this for Inbox Zero documentation as well. Basically, the documentation you want effortlessly, I think that's a good way of describing it. You'll see they have quite beautiful docs. Here you've got PairsDB as the example. You have API reference documentation. We just saw some examples of it. Pinecone also uses it. Anthropic, Cursor that we mentioned at the beginning of the video, Resend, Upstash. So a lot of our friends from this video are using it, and we even found another site which is using it, which is Loops. You have guides like this, so you can easily set up. You have the API documentation, which is what we saw, API reference, which is what we saw on Resend, and you have SDK docs as well. So this is how you install PairsDB, for example. And you even have chat, AI chat, so people can chat with your documentation. This is one of the pro features, but you can use our platform for free, and it's got quite a lot of features built in, and then it's got some extras which are on the paid plan, but you don't need to be using the paid plan to get a lot of value from them. And so what I really like about them is you can just like git push your changes, your documentation. It will be like .md or .mdx files. You'll push them to GitHub, and it will just automatically update, and just like the entire platform work. It's your own custom domain. Even custom domains are in the free tier, which is really cool. And if you want to edit on their like visual editor as well on the platform, so somebody doesn't have to go into the code to edit it, but just log into Mintlify, so that's also an option for people on your team. Novu is an open source notification infrastructure for developers, and I've done a video on this as well, so link below. What it basically means is if you have complex notification systems, or even like simple ones, you could still use it, but Novu will help you manage all of that. So in this example, you can see if the user is online, I want to do one thing, which is a digest, and I want to like send them a digest email via SendGrid. If they are online, then I want to send them an SMS, a message via Twilio. Another provider you might use is in-app, so you'll send a push notification to them. And so you can imagine there are lots of different ways you can notify your users, if it's Slack, email, whatever, within the platform as a notification in the web. And so they provide all of this for you out the box, and you can use different logic, like if the user is online or not. And digests are also really cool, which is, let's say you're a platform like Twitter, and every time somebody gets a tweet, you want to notify them. But well, you don't actually want to do that, because then you'll be notifying certain people 100 times a minute. So instead, what you can do is a digest, and you can wait, like say half an hour, to update them with all the updates to the last half an hour, and that's called a digest. But if they're in the platform itself, then you'll show them the notification here. So all of this, like the heavy lifting for this, Novu just does it for you. It's open source, which is really cool, but they also have a SaaS platform, so you can self-host it, or you can also use their platform. That's the end of the video. I covered quite a lot in it. Let me know what you think about it. If there are any tools that I missed out, I would love to know. But yeah, enjoy. I'm probably going to do another video like this in the near future, like some other tools that I use and tips and tricks. Actually, the first recording of this video video had a lot more in it, but I wanted to get this out in like part 1. I'll have a part 2, maybe a part 3 coming after. Enjoy.